The Kundar Mountains show no mercy. Every ridge conceals a threat. Every valley swallows sound whole. In 2008, these mountains consumed an entire patrol team, without leaving a single trace. My call sign is Hawk. I'm Sergeant Daniel Harris, and nothing I'm about to tell you will appear in any official record. Command buried it all, sealed the files, and ordered us into permanent silence. 15 years on, I still wake in the dead of night hearing Marcus Reed's broken voice crackling over the radio, begging for a rescue that never arrived. Despite it being October, the cold cut straight through our clothing and settled deep into our bones. Our forward operating base was a crude structure of sandbags and HESCO barriers carved into the mountainside beside the Peck River Valley. We called it FOB Viper. 32 Marines rotated through patrol duty along a stretch of road the Taliban had made their personal minefield. The local population kept their distance, not out of hostility, but survival. Every time we passed through a village, someone's home got searched. In a place where neutrality was the only currency, trust eroded fast. It all unraveled without warning. My squad had been in country 5 months, long enough to read the terrain, short enough to stay sharp. Corporal Marcus Reed was my finest rifleman, 23 years old, with a boyish face that made him look even younger. He volunteered for everything. First one ready, last one to gripe. Private Jonathan Miller handled communications, a wiry kid from Ohio who could resurrect a dead radio with nothing but duct tape and sheer optimism. They were the kind of Marines you'd trust with your life when everything fell apart. The mission brief came down on October 14th. Lieutenant Potter stood before a topographic map, finger on a red circle 15 clicks northeast of our position. Intelligence had flagged Taliban movement through a mountain pass linking 2 valleys. The assignment was straightforward: 4-man patrol, reckon the area, mark enemy positions, return before dark. We'd done it 100 times. Reed, Miller, and 2 others from 2nd Squad drew the task: Lance Corporal Devin Price and Private First Class Kyle Anderson. Price was methodical and precise, the kind of Marine who triple-checked his gear and never overlooked a detail. Anderson was his polar opposite: brash, loud, always talking about the car waiting for him back home. Together, they made a solid fire team. I helped them load their packs that morning, running through ammo counts and water supplies. "You got enough batteries for the PRC?" I asked Miller as he stuffed his ruck. 6 spares, Sergeant." "We good," he grinned, carrying that restless energy he always had before a patrol. Reed slapped a fresh magazine into his M4 and press-checked the chamber. 15 clicks out, 15 back. "We'll be drinking warm Rippets by 1600. I should have gone with them. That thought has never left me. But Lieutenant Potter needed me at the FOB coordinating mortar support for another squad running Overwatch en route Michigan. So I stood at the gate and watched them dissolve into the gray haze clinging to the mountains like a burial shroud. The last transmission came at 1,347 hours. Miller's voice, clear and composed. "Viper Main, this is Reaper 2. Checkpoint Delta reached. No enemy contact. Moving to Rally Point Echo. Over." I was in the TOC when the call came through. Porter logged their position on the map, right where they should have been, working through a narrow gorge threading between 2 ridge lines. Routine patrol movement. "Reaper 2, Viper Main copies. Report when you reach Echo. How's the weather up there?" Static crackled. Then Miller's voice returned, slightly distorted. "Fog's thick, Viper. Visibility down to 50 meters. Ground solid. We're making good time." That was it. The last words any of us heard from them. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. At 14:30, Potter tried raising them again. Nothing, just the hollow hiss of dead air. He cycled through frequencies, hoping they'd accidentally switch channels. Still nothing. By 1500, the TOC was packed with officers and NCOs staring at that map as if it held answers. Could be terrain blocking the signal, someone offered. Those gorges play hell with comms. Porter shook his head. They should have reached the rally point by now. Even with the fog, they had plenty of time. At 1530, he made the call. Send a search team. I volunteered without hesitation. Grabbed my rifle, loaded fresh magazines, assembled a 6-man element. We were rolling through the gate within 20 minutes. 2 Hums loaded with combat gear, medical supplies, and enough firepower to fight out of an ambush. The drive took 90 minutes. The dirt road coiled through the foothills, climbing higher with every mile. The fog Miller had described had thickened into a solid gray wall. Our headlights barely reached 10 feet ahead. The mountains loomed on both sides, dark shapes that seemed to shift when you looked away. Nobody spoke. Just the diesel grind and gravel crunching under tires. We reached the last known checkpoint at 1710, just as daylight began dying. This was where Reed's team should have turned east toward the rally point. I dismounted with my squad, weapons up, scanning rocks and sparse vegetation. The air felt off. Too still. No wind. No birdsong. Nothing. Just a suffocating silence, as though the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Spread out, I ordered. Look for tracks, brass, blood, anything. We moved in a loose line, checking both sides of the trail. Private Torres found the first sign 70 meters up the path, bootprints in the dust. 4 sets, moving in formation, tread matching standard issue boots. Tracks look fresh, Torres said, kneeling beside them. Can't be more than a few hours old. We followed the trail deeper into the gorge. The walls closed in on both sides, rising 200 feet above us. Perfect ambush terrain. My finger hovered near the trigger guard, eyes sweeping every shadow. But there was nothing. No movement. No sound. No sign of life except those prints pulling us forward. Half a click in, we found the first piece of equipment. Miller's radio handset lying in the middle of the path, as if dropped mid-stride. I picked it up. Casing intact. No bullet holes. No blood. Just sitting there in the date, cable still attached. Why would he drop this? Torres asked. I didn't answer, because I had no answer. Miller treated that radio like a firstborn. He wouldn't abandon it unless something forced his hand. I clipped it to my vest and kept moving. 50 meters ahead, Price's rifle. An M4 carbine, fully loaded, safety on, leaning against a boulder like he'd set it down to take a stretch. No Price. No signs of struggle. Just the weapon, waiting. My gut twisted hard. Marines don't leave their rifles. Ever. It's hammered into you from day one. You can lose your pack, your helmet, even your boots, but never your weapon. Finding that M4 was like stumbling across a severed limb. Sergeant, someone called from the right flank. I turned to see Corporal Hayes pointing at the ground. More boot prints, scattered, overlapping, running in every direction, as if the patrol had broken formation and begun wandering at random. They split up, Hayes said, confusion thickening his voice. Why the hell would they split up? We followed the scattered tracks. They led off the main path and up a steep incline buried in loose scree. Climbing that slope in full gear would have been brutal and pointless. There was no tactical reason to go that way. But the tracks were there, for distinct trails heading upward into the fog. Reed, I shouted, my voice bouncing off the canyon walls. Marcus, Miller, anyone. Silence swallowed my words whole. Not even an echo returned. It felt as though the mountains absorbed the sound before it could travel. We climbed. My boots slipped on loose rock, sending pebbles cascading behind me. The fog thickened until I could barely see Torres directly in front of me. The air tasted metallic, like copper, like blood, and every breath felt heavier than the last. At the top of the ridge, we found their packs. All 4 rucksacks lined up in a neat row, zippers closed, contents untouched. I opened reeds with shaking hands. Sleeping bag, rations, extra ammo, personal items. Everything present. Same with the others. As if they'd simply decided to set down their gear and keep walking unburdened. "This doesn't make sense," Hayes muttered. "Why would they dump their packs?" I was scanning the area, searching for anything that explained this, when I saw the cave. A dark opening in the rock face, maybe 6 feet high and 4 feet wide, hidden behind a cluster of boulders. The boot prints led straight to it and vanished inside. My blood went cold. Caves in Afghanistan were either Taliban strongholds or killing grounds, sometimes both. We'd lost Marines before to cave complexes rigged with IEDs or lead ambush positions. But those caves always showed signs of use. Brass casings, refuse, disturbed earth. This one looked untouched, ancient, like it had been sealed for centuries and only recently cracked open. "Set security," I ordered. "I'm going in." "Sergeant, we should wait for—" "I'm going in," I repeated, cutting Hayes off. My Marines were in there. I wasn't leaving without them. I clicked on my weapon light and stepped into the darkness. The temperature dropped immediately, at least 20 degrees colder inside. The cave was narrow, forcing me to turn sideways to squeeze through. My light swept across smooth stone walls covered in strange markings. Not Pashto, not Arabic. Something older. Symbols I didn't recognize, carved deep into the rock. The passage opened into a larger chamber. My light swept the space, and I froze. In the center of the cave floor was a perfect circle of stones, each one placed with deliberate precision. And inside that circle, 4 sets of boot prints, facing outward. As if Reed and his team had stood there together before. Before what? There was nothing else. No bodies, no blood, no signs of violence. Just those prints in the dust, leading into the circle and stopping. As though my Marines had simply ceased to exist. I stood in that cold darkness, weapon light trembling in my hand, and felt something I had never once felt in combat. Primal, absolute fear. Not the fear of bullets or blast. The fear of something far worse. The fear that whatever had taken my Marines wasn't human. "Sergeant," Hayes called from outside. "You need to see this." I backed out of the cave, unable to take my eyes off those prints until I was fully outside. Hayes stood at the ridge's edge, pointing down into the valley below. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach drop. 300 feet down, half hidden in fog, were 4 figures standing motionless in the middle of an empty field. Even at that distance, I could see they wore our gear, our uniforms. "Is that them?" Torres whispered. I raised my rifle and flipped down my ACOG scope. The magnification snapped the figures into sharp focus, and what I saw locked my trigger finger in place. They stood in perfect formation, backs straight, arms at their sides, faces tilted upward toward us. But their faces were wrong. Too pale, too smooth, like wax masks stretched over skulls. And their eyes reflected the last of the daylight like animals caught in headlights. "Reed!" I shouted down into the valley. "Marcus!" The figures didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, staring up at us with those hollow, terrible eyes. Then, as one, they turned and walked into the fog. Smooth, synchronized movements, puppets on invisible strings. Within seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the gray. We scrambled down that ridge so fast I'm amazed no one broke an ankle. By the time we reached the field, there was nothing. No tracks, no disturbed grass, no trace that anyone had stood there moments before. Just empty ground and that oppressive silence bearing down from every direction. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. Viper Main, this is Hawk. We found their gear. No sign of personnel. Requesting immediate QRF and medevac birds on standby. Porter's voice crackled back, tight with stress. Copy, Hawk. What's your situation? I looked at the empty field, at the cave behind us, at my Marines' pale faces. How could I explain what we'd just witnessed? How do you put into words a wrongness that deep? Viper, we need to pull back to the FOB. Something's not right here. We need more personnel and daylight. Negative, Hawk. You're ordered to continue search until... Sir. I cut him off, something I'd never done before. We need to leave. Now. A long pause. Then, copy, RTB immediately. We'll debrief when you're back. We moved fast, weapons up, eyes never still. Nobody spoke during the drive back. What was there to say? We'd gone looking for 4 missing Marines and returned with their gear, their weapons, and something else entirely. Something that wore their faces but wasn't them. We rolled through the FOB gates at 2,130 hours. Lieutenant Potter was waiting alongside half a dozen officers I didn't recognize. Clean uniforms. No unit patches. The kind of anonymous look that screamed intelligence or special operations. Sergeant Harris, Porter said, "These gentlemen need to debrief you immediately." "Sir, my men need rest." "Now, Sergeant." They took me to a windowless room. For 3 hours, they asked the same questions in rotation. What did you see? Describe the cave. Describe the figures. Are you certain it was your Marines? Could it have been Taliban in stolen gear? I told them everything. The cave, the stone circle, the symbols, the figures in the valley. By the end, they were exchanging glances I couldn't decode. Sergeant Harris, one of them finally said, "What we're about to tell you is classified. You will not repeat it to your men or anyone else. Is that understood?" I nodded. This isn't the first time this has happened. 6 months ago, a British patrol disappeared in the same area. 3 months before that, an Afghan National Army squad. Same circumstances every time. Gear abandoned. No bodies recovered. My hands balled into fists. What took them? We don't know, but we believe there's something in those mountains. Something old. And we need your help finding it before it takes anyone else. That's when I understood. The search for Reed, Miller, Price, and Anderson wasn't ending. It was only just beginning. They didn't give us time to breathe. By 0600 the next morning, I was back in that briefing room with the nameless officers and a new face, Dr. Sarah Vance, an anthropologist from a government agency that didn't officially exist. She spread photographs across the table. Cave systems throughout Kuna province, each marked with a red X. "Sergeant Harris," she began, her voice measured and clinical, "what you found yesterday matches 17 other sites we've documented in this region. Each location shares identical characteristics, stone circles, ancient symbols, and a complete absence of remains despite clear evidence of entry." I studied the photographs. Some caves looked identical to the one we'd found. Others were larger, more elaborate, but the symbols were the same. That same unsettling script carved deep into stone. "What are they?" I asked. Dr. Vance hesitated, glancing at the officers before answering. "We believe they are threshold markers. Doorways, if you will. The local tribes have passed down stories about these places for centuries. They call them the Silent Gates. According to legend, ancient peoples used them to banish enemies or criminals. Anyone who entered never returned. That's folklore, Porter said from the doorway. The facts, one of the officers cut in, are that we've lost 19 personnel in 6 months. British SAS and now 4 of our own Marines. Whatever is happening, it's accelerating. Dr. Vance produced another photograph, a village roughly 10 clicks from FOB Viper. 3 days ago, an entire family vanished from this village. The locals have sealed the cave entrance with stones and refuse to go near it. Our sources say there's a village elder who claims to know how to close these gates permanently. And you want me to find him? I said, already knowing the answer. We want you to lead a small, specialized team. Minimal footprint. Locate the elder, extract whatever knowledge he carries, and get out. I should have refused. Should have told them to send their own people. But Marcus Reed's face kept flashing through my mind. That thing wearing his skin, staring up at me from the valley with empty, luminous eyes. If there was any chance of bringing him back, I had to try. When do we move? 1,400 hours. 4-man team plus your interpreter. Air support on standby. But Sergeant, the officer leaned forward, if you encounter anything like what you saw yesterday, you do not engage. You mark the location and extract immediately. We need intelligence, not heroics. By 1330, my team was staged at the motor pool. I'd handpicked every one of them. Corporal Hayes, solid, unshakable. Private Torres, sharp eyes, steady hands. Lance Corporal Jackson, our best marksman. And Fed, our interpreter, a 40-year-old Afghan who'd worked with us for 2 years and understood the tribal landscape better than any of us. It was Fed who broke the silence as we loaded the hums. Sergeant Hawk, the village we're going to, these people are deeply afraid. They will not want to speak about the caves. That's why we're bringing you, I said, running through my rifle check for the 3rd time. They trust you. He shook his head slowly. No one trusts anyone when it comes to the silent gates. These are not Taliban stories or ghosts from the Soviet War. This is something far older. My grandfather's grandfather knew these stories. He said the mountains remember everything, and some memories should stay buried. The drive took 90 minutes through terrain that got rougher with every mile. The village sat in a narrow valley, 20 mud brick compounds surrounded by terraced fields. Cooking fires sent thin threads of smoke into the sky. Children played near a stone well. On the surface, it looked peaceful and ordinary, except for one thing. There were no adult men anywhere. Only women and the elderly moved between buildings. We parked outside the village perimeter and approached on foot. The children scattered the moment they saw us. Shutters closed. By the time we reached the central compound, the village felt like something hollowed out. This isn't right, Hayes muttered, scanning rooftops. Where is everyone? Fed called out in Pashto, his voice carrying through the empty lanes. For a long moment, silence. Then an old man emerged from the largest compound, leaning heavily on a walking stick. His face was carved with age, eyes clouded, but his gaze was sharp and direct. Fed spoke rapidly. The old man listened, then responded in a voice like shifting gravel. Their exchange ran back and forth for several minutes while my team held security, fingers near trigger guards, watching every shadow. Finally, Fed turned to me, his expression tight. His name is Rahman. He says he is the last keeper of the old knowledge. He knows why the gates are opening again. Ask him about our missing Marines. More conversation. Rahman's expression darkened. He gestured toward the mountains, speaking urgently. Fed's face went pale. What did he say? I pressed. He says, your men are not dead, but they are not alive, either. The gates do not kill. They transform. Anyone who passes through becomes part of what waits on the other side. My blood turned cold. What waits on the other side? Raman spoke directly to me then, in broken English. Old ones. Before mosque, before book, they sleep in stone. Gates keep them sleeping. But gates cracking now. Too much war, too much blood. Mountain waking up. How do we close the gates? He shook his head. Cannot close. Can only seal. Need 3 things. He raised gnarled fingers. Stone from first gate. Blood from keeper. And the song that binds. Where is the first gate? He pointed north, toward a mountain peak buried in cloud. 2-day walk. Very dangerous. Taliban there, and worse than Taliban. I was about to respond when Torres hissed a warning. Movement, 3 o'clock. We spun, weapons up. Figures were emerging from between the compounds. 10, 15, 20. Men, women, children, all moving in that same synchronized motion I'd seen in the valley. Faces blank, skin waxy and pale, advancing as a single organism, tightening their circle around us. Fed, tell Raman to get inside, I ordered, voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. But Raman didn't move. He planted his feet, raised his walking stick, and began shouting in a language that was neither Pashto nor Dari, ancient syllables that made my teeth ache and my vision swim at the edges. The figures stopped, 30 feet away. They stood in perfect stillness, heads tilted at angles that necks weren't designed for, watching us with eyes like polished stone. Sergeant, Jackson whispered, that's Anderson. Front row, 4th from the left. My stomach collapsed. He was right. Private Kyle Anderson stood among the figures, still wearing his torn uniform, face empty and slack. But it wasn't him. Not anymore. The thing wearing Anderson's body opened its mouth. What came out wasn't speech. It was wind through hollow reeds, a chorus of voices led into one. Leave the keeper. Take the gate. Like hell, I growled. Raman kept chanting, his voice gaining strength. The figures began to retreat, step by synchronized step, but their eyes never left us. The thing in Anderson's body tilted its head further, bones cracking audibly, and smiled. It was the worst smile I have ever seen in my life. Too wide, splitting the face nearly to the ears. Then they turned and walked back into the compounds, dissolving into shadow. The silence that followed was suffocating. Raman lowered his stick, breathing in ragged pulls. They test. See if I still strong. Song still works, but not for long. Every day, they grow stronger. We need to move, Hayes urged. If those things come back. They don't need weapons, Fed interrupted, his voice shaking. Raman says they only need to touch you. Once they touch you, you become like them. I made the call. Raman, you're coming with us. Back to the FOB, where it's safer. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. No place safe. But yes, I come. Show you first gate. Teach you sealing before I am too old, or mountain takes me too. We loaded him into the Humvee and started back. Raman sat in silence the entire drive, staring at the mountains as if reading a story written in the stone. Halfway back, he spoke quietly to Fed, who translated. He says the gates have been sealed 4 times in recorded history. Each time required great sacrifice. The last sealing was during the reign of Alexander, when this land was still called Bactria. 300 men entered the gates to seal them from inside. None returned. 300 men, I repeated quietly, and you want us to do it with a fire team and 1 old man. The song is stronger now, Raman said in English. Old one's weaker, but must move fast. Every night, more gates open. Soon too many. He drew a finger slowly across his throat. When we returned to FOB Viper at 18:20 hours, the base was on high alert. Porter met us at the gate with news that cinched my gut. We getting reports from 3 other villages, missing persons, at least 20 civilians in the last 48 hours, and that's just what's being reported. Command believes the real number is much higher. I helped Rahman down from the Humvee. Sir, this is Rahman. He knows how to seal the gates. Porter studied the old man with visible skepticism. Sergeant, I hope you know what you're doing. Command is pulling the plug. As of 2,200 tonight, all patrols are suspended. We going full defensive posture until they figure out what the hell is going on. We can't wait, I argued. I don't care what Rahman says. We've lost 4 Marines and I'm not losing any more. The decision is final. I started to press it, but Rahman gripped my arm with surprising force. Tonight, he whispered. Must go tonight. Moon is dark. Old ones are weakest on dark moon. Wait longer. We miss the window. I looked at Hayes, Torres, Jackson. Saw the same grim resolve in all 3 of them. We knew what had to be done. Sir, I said carefully, request permission to run one final recon, just to mark the first gate's location for when Command authorizes the mission. Porter held my gaze for a long moment. He knew I was lying, knew exactly what I was planning. You have until 0600. After that, if you're not back, I'm reporting you AWOL and sending a QRF to drag you in. Understood. Understood, sir. We had 8 hours. 8 hours to reach the first gate, perform whatever ritual Rahman knew, and pray to God it held. 8 hours to save Reed and the others, and everyone else those mountains might swallow if we failed. As we prepped our gear under the harsh motorpool lights, Fed pulled me aside. Sergeant Hawk, Rahman told me something else. Something he didn't want to say in front of the others. What? He says the song requires a life. Someone must remain at the gate after it is sealed. Remain until what? Fed's eyes were dark with dread. Until the mountain decides to release them. Could be days. Could be years. Rahman says the last keeper was his great-grandfather. He entered the gate in 1847. His body was found in 1923. He had not aged a single day. I should have stopped right there. Should have told Porter everything and let someone above my pay grade inherit this nightmare. But I closed my eyes and saw Reed's face. Saw Miller fussing with that radio. Saw all 4 of them, trusting me to keep them safe. I'd already failed them once. I wasn't going to do it again. We moved out at 2,200 hours, on foot. No vehicles. Minimal gear. 6 of us, myself, Hayes, Torres, Jackson, Fed, and Rahman, moving through darkness so thick it had weight. The old man set a punishing pace despite his age, navigating the mountain trails as if he'd walked them 10,000 times. Maybe he had. We moved by night vision, following his directions through terrain that grew more treacherous with every click. At midnight we paused to rest on a ridge overlooking a deep valley. Rahman pointed to a cliff face on the far side, barely visible in the darkness. There. First gate. Where it all began. Even from that distance, I could feel it, a wrongness in the air, like reality had grown thin. The temperature fell 10 degrees. My breath misted. Frost formed on my rifle. The descent into the valley took an hour. The climb up the other side took 3. My hands were raw and my muscles were screaming, but we kept moving. Rahman never faltered once, scaling rock faces that should have stopped a man half his age. At 0320 hours, we reached the cave entrance. It was massive, at least 20 feet high, framed by those same carved symbols, but far more elaborate than anything we'd seen before. The stone circle inside was larger too, big enough to hold 50 men. And in the center, something that stopped the air in my lungs. 4 figures stood perfectly still, facing outward. Reed, Miller, Price, Anderson. Their eyes glowed a faint, cold blue in the darkness. Jesus Christ, Torres breathed. Rahman was already moving, pulling items from a pouch at his waist. A piece of dark stone, a curved knife, a leather scroll dense with writing. He gestured urgently for us to form a circle around the standing figures. No matter what happens, he said, do not break the circle. Do not stop chanting when I teach you words. If circle breaks, they take us all. What about them? I pointed at Reed and the others. Can we bring them back? His expression was weighted with sorrow. Perhaps, if Song is strong enough, if Mountain is willing. But Sergeant Hawk, they not same. Even if bodies return, souls may be changed. Changed is better than gone. Teach us the song. As Rahman began speaking the ancient words, syllable by syllable, the temperature plunged further. The figures in the circle stared. Reed's head turned slowly toward me, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw recognition in those glowing eyes. Then his mouth opened and he spoke in that horrible lead voice. Hawk, why did you leave us? My voice caught, but I forced out the words Rahman had taught me, adding them to his chant. Hayes joined, then Torres, then Jackson, then Fed. Our voices rose together, filling the cave with sound that seemed to resonate in the stone itself, as though the mountain were vibrating in response. The figures began to scream. It wasn't human. It was lead. Dozens of voices compressed into 4 throats, shrieking at frequencies that made my skull vibrate and my vision crawl. Reed's body convulsed, spine arching impossibly, fingers splayed like claws. The other 3 mirrored him exactly, puppets jerking on invisible strings. Keep chanting. Rahman shouted over the noise, his voice raw but unwavering. Blood ran down his arm where he'd cut his palm with the curved knife, letting drops fall onto the dark stone. I forced the words out, syllables that felt wrong on my tongue, consonants that shouldn't exist in any human language. Hayes was at my side, pale but steady, holding the rhythm. Torres stumbled over a phrase and the temperature spiked violently, frost melting to steam in seconds. The figures lurched half a step forward before Rahman's voice cracked like a thunderclap and drove them back. Do not stop, he commanded. Even 1 second. Circle breaks. The symbols carved into the cave walls began to glow. Faint at first, then brighter, pulsing in rhythm with our voices. The stone circle beneath the figures lit up, threads of light connecting each carved symbol like a circuit powering on. The air felt physically heavy, pressing down on us with real weight. Jackson's voice wavered. He was staring at Anderson, tears running silently down his face. They'd been bunkmates, close as brothers. Watching his friend twisted into this thing was tearing him apart. Jackson, stay with me, I barked between syllables. He needs us focused. The light intensified. The figures began to sink, not falling, but being drawn down into the stone as if it had turned to liquid. Reed's glowing eyes locked on mine, and for 1 fractured second, I saw him, the real him, terrified and pleading. Hawk, his voice cut through the chorus, clear and human for just that one word. Hurts. My throat tightened to nothing, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Rahman was moving around the circle, pressing the blooded stone against each carved symbol on the ground, speaking faster and louder. The cave shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Deep below, that grinding sound returned, like continental plates slowly shifting. The figures were waist-deep now, still screaming, hands reaching upward. Miller's fingers grazed the edge of the circle, and where they touched, the stone cracked, a hairline fracture spreading toward Torres. "Jump back!" I shouted. Torres leaped aside just as the crack reached him. The circle held. Barely. Rahman stood at the head of the formation now, the blooded stone raised above his head, shouting words that made the air visibly ripple. Then he stepped into the circle. "Rahman! No!" Fayed screamed, breaking his chant. The old man ignored him, walking calmly between the sinking figures until he stood in the exact center. He placed the stone on the ground and knelt, pressing both palms flat against it. The light exploded outward, blinding white, and the figures vanished with a final unified shriek that echoed and echoed and echoed until the cave fell silent. When my vision cleared, Rahman was still kneeling, but he had aged. Not years, decades. His hair had gone entirely white. His skin hung loose on his frame as though it had forgotten how to hold to bone. But he was smiling. "It is done," he whispered. "First gate sealed." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "But Sergeant Hawk, I cannot leave circle. Must stay. Keep gate closed. You understand?" I did, and I hated it with everything in me. "How long?" "Until Mountain releases me. Or until I die, whichever comes first." He settled into a sitting position, back against the stone. "Tell my village. Tell them Rahman kept his oath." "We can't just leave you here," Hayes protested. "You must. Gate will not hold without keeper. And there are more gates, 17 I count, all opening. You stop them." "Yes." His eyes found mine, ancient with knowing. "You save your Marines. Bring them home." "They are gone," I said, my voice cracking. We watched them sink into the stone. Rahman shook his head slowly. "Not gone. Trapped between here and there. Other gates connect to this one. You seal them all. You free everyone. But must be fast. Dark moon ends tomorrow night. After that." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. We stood there in that cave, 5 armed men and 1 dying elder, and none of us had words. Finally, Rahman spoke again, softer. "Go. I have water. I have time. The mountain and I, we make peace now." We left him there. Had to. Every step away from that cave felt like a betrayal, but we moved anyway, descending the cliff face as dawn broke over the peaks. By the time we reached the valley floor at 0615, the sun was burning off the night's frost and my radio was screaming, "Hawk, Viper main, respond immediately." Porter's voice was barely controlled fury. I keyed the MIC. "Viper main, Hawk, we're 5 clicks out. Returning to base." "Sergeant, you are 15 minutes past your authorized window. What the hell happened up there?" "We sealed the first gate, sir, but we need to move on the others. Now." "Static. Then, say again." "Sir, there are 17 gates total. We need assets and manpower before tomorrow night, or this entire province is going to disappear." More static. When Porter came back, his voice had changed entirely. "Hawk, command wants you back here immediately, and they are sending someone to speak with you. Someone with serious authority. They've been monitoring this entire conversation." My stomach dropped. "How long have they been listening, sir?" "Since the moment you left the wire last night. Every word." We double-timed it back to FOB Viper, arriving at 0745. The base had transformed overnight. Black helicopters without markings sat on the landing zone. Personnel in civilian clothes and plate carriers moved with the precise efficiency of Tier 1 operators. The TOC had been entirely taken over. A woman in her 50s met us at the gate. No uniform, just tactical pants and a polo shirt with a Glock on her hip. Her eyes were the coldest I'd ever encountered. Sergeant Harris. I'm Director Clean. Walk with me. Not a request. I handed my rifle to Hayes and followed her to a containerized unit set up as a mobile command center. Inside, the walls were covered in topographic maps, satellite imagery, and photographs of cave systems across eastern Afghanistan. You've done something remarkable, Clean said without preamble. You've confirmed what we've suspected for 18 months. These gates aren't natural formations. They are artificial, built by a civilization that predates written history. With respect, I don't care about the history. I care about getting my Marines back. She studied me. Your Marines are gone, Sergeant. The sooner you accept that, the easier this becomes. Rahman said. Rahman is a village elder who believes in fairy tales. She cut me off and pulled out a tablet. This is a non-disclosure agreement. You and your team will sign it. You will never speak about what happened in those mountains. In exchange, you'll receive medals for valor and immediate rotation back to the States. And if we refuse? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Then you'll be held for psychiatric evaluation and detained until you're no longer considered a security risk, which could be quite some time. Before I could respond, an alarm tore through the base. Red lights flashed. Personnel scrambled to positions. Clean grabbed her radio. Sit rep. A voice crackled back. Multiple contacts. North perimeter. At least 50 individuals approaching on foot. No weapons visible. Not responding to warnings. We ran to the north wall. What I saw turned my blood to ice. A crowd was walking toward the base in perfect synchronization. Men, women, children, all with that same waxy skin and glowing eyes. Leading them was Corporal Marcus Reed. Hold fire! Clean shouted into her radio. I repeat, hold fire. Those things are hostile, I said urgently. We need to study them, Sergeant. This is a first contact scenario. That's not first contact. That's an invasion. The crowd halted 50 meters from the wire. Reed stepped forward alone, head tilted at that unnatural angle, and spoke in that layered chorus voice, carrying impossible clarity across the distance. We offer trade. Return what you took. Give us the gates, or we take everyone. What did you take? Clean called back. Reed's head swiveled toward her voice. The sealer. The keeper. The blood price. You stole completion. Gates must stay open. Balance must be restored. They want Rahman, I said quietly. They know we sealed the first gate, and they want us to break it. Clean's jaw tightened. We can't give them what we don't have. They don't know that. For several seconds, nobody moved, 50 pairs of glowing eyes fixed on the base. Then Reed raised one hand and smiled that terrible too-wide smile. As one, the crowd stepped forward. Open fire, Clean ordered. The M240S on the north wall opened up, traces cutting through morning air. Rounds tore through the advancing figures, but they didn't fall. Bodies jerked with impacts, holes opening in flesh. Instead of blood, gray dust sprayed out. The wounds sealed themselves within seconds. Grenades! Someone shouted. Explosions scattered the crowd, ripping bodies apart. But the pieces pulled themselves back together, reforming, continuing their advance without pause. They reached the wire and began climbing, moving with unnatural strength and coordination. Fall back to secondary positions. Clean was running now, pulling me with her. Get to the army. We're going to need everything we have. I yanked free. Bullets won't stop them. I told you that. The only thing that works is the ritual, the sealing. We don't have the resources. Then get them, I said, or everyone on this base becomes like Reed. She stared at me, running calculations behind those cold eyes. Then she grabbed her radio. "Command, this is clean. Authorization code Delta 79er. I need immediate air support and full authorization to deploy sealing teams to all documented gate locations. Yes, I understand the resource allocation. I don't care. If we lose this FOB, we lose the entire valley." The first figure cleared the wire. A child, maybe 8 years old, moving with that same mechanical purpose as the adults. Torres put 3 rounds center mass. It kept coming. Hayes stepped up with the M203 and fired a high-explosive round point-blank. The explosion vaporized the child's torso. The dust swirled, compressed, and reformed within seconds. "Inside! Get inside now!" We fell back to the TOC and sealed the door. Through the window, I watched the figures pour over the wire. Not running, not rushing, just walking with that terrible unhurried purpose, spreading through the base like a slow infection. "How long until air support?" I asked clean. 10 minutes for the first strike. "But Sergeant," she was staring at her tablet, face drained of color. "We're receiving reports from 17 separate locations. They are all doing this simultaneously. Every gate we've documented is sending out crowds. We're talking hundreds, possibly thousands, mobilizing at once. They are coordinated," Hayes said from the window. "One mind controlling many bodies," Fed added quietly. He'd barely spoken since we returned, but now his voice carried certainty. "Rahman told me the old stories. Before they were sealed, the gates all led to a single place. One prison, one prisoner. Something so terrible it took 300 men to lock it away." "What was it?" Clean demanded. Fed met her eyes. "Something that eats worlds." The building shook as something slammed into the door. Once, twice, the metal began to warp inward. Through the window, more figures were pressing against the walls, gathering with patient, deliberate intent. Then I heard it. Reed's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "Hawk, open the door. We just want to go home." My hand moved toward the lock without my permission. Some desperate part of me wanted to believe it was really him, that I could save him by simply opening the door. Hayes grabbed my wrist. "That's not him." "I know," I whispered. "But God, I wanted it to be." The building shook again. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. We had minutes, maybe less. Clean was shouting into her radio, coordinating with command, but I could hear the defeat seeping into her voice. Whatever assets were coming, they wouldn't arrive in time. That's when I saw it on the monitor showing satellite feeds. The crowds weren't attacking randomly. They were moving toward specific locations, arranging themselves in circles around certain buildings, using their own bodies to recreate the stone circles. "They are opening more gates," I said. "Right here on the base. They are going to turn FOB Viper into a threshold." Clean followed my gaze. "How long?" "Minutes." She made a decision instantly. "Everyone who can fight, grab a weapon. Everyone else, helipad. We evacuating." "We can't run from this," I argued. "It'll just spread." "Then what do you suggest, Sergeant?" I looked at my team. Hayes, Torres, Jackson, Fed, all of them battered, exhausted, hollow-eyed, and still standing. Still ready. We do what Rahman did. We become keepers. All 17 gates at once. "That's a death sentence," Clean said flatly. "It's the only sentence that matters." The door burst open. Figures poured in, reaching with pale hands. We fought our way out, firing, driving through gaps, creating inches of space with everything we had. We made it to the helipad where 2 Blackhawks sat with rotors already turning. "Load up!" Clean shouted. But I wasn't getting on that helicopter. Neither was my team. We ran the opposite direction, toward the army, fighting through a base that was becoming something unrecognizable. Behind me, I heard Clean screaming my name, her voice swallowed by rotor wash as the helicopters lifted off. We had maybe an hour before dark moon ended. 1 hour to reach 16 more gates and seal them all. Impossible. But Marcus Reed was in there somewhere, trapped between worlds, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't fail him again. We hit the armory at a dead run. Hayes kicked the door in while Torres and Jackson held cover. The walls lined with weapons and explosives we'd never normally touch. None of it would stop what we were facing, but we loaded up anyway. Old habits die hard. We need a vehicle, I said, grabbing extra magazines. Fast, rough terrain. Fed pointed through the window to the motor pool. Between two hums sat a single Polaris MZR, a 4-seat tactical vehicle built for speed in broken country, keys still in the ignition. We fought across 50 meters of open ground. The figures moved slow and methodical, not trying to kill us but herding us toward the center where more of them were completing their human circle. Jackson took point, his M4 barking in controlled bursts. Rounds didn't drop the figures, but the impact staggered them enough to create gaps. We pushed through, reached the MZR, and piled in. I took the wheel. Hayes rode shotgun with the map and GPS. Closest gate is 4 clicks northeast, Hayes said as I fired the engine. Cave system near a dried riverbed. I floored it. The lightweight vehicle leaped forward. Behind us, FOB Viper burned. Smoke rose in thick columns as the figures continued their work, methodically transforming our base into something else. Something wrong. The drive was brutal. No roads, just open terrain and whatever gaps we could find, the suspension screaming the entire way. But it held. At 0847 hours, we reached the coordinates. The cave entrance was smaller than the first gate, maybe 6 feet across, but the symbols were identical. A dozen figures stood guard, facing outward in a protective circle. "We don't have time to fight through them," Torres said. "We don't have to." I pulled out the piece of stone Rahman had pressed into my hand before we left the first cave. I'd nearly forgotten it until now. A small chip of the same dark rock he'd used in the ritual. Rahman said all the gates are connected. If we use this, we might be able to seal them faster. "Might isn't great odds," Jackson muttered. But he was already out of the vehicle, rifle up. We moved fast and loud, laying down suppressive fire that scattered the figures long enough to buy seconds. I ran into the cave with Fed, leaving the others to hold the entrance. The stone circle glowed faintly, already active. I could feel the pull, that same wrongness from the first cave, that sensation of reality thinning at the edges. Fed began chanting, voice wavering but holding. I placed Rahman's stone in the center, pressed my cut palm against it, and let my blood mix with the old man's. The effect was immediate. The glow surged, symbols flaring bright, a sound like shattering glass ringing through the chamber. Then the pull stopped. The wrongness faded. The cave went dark and quiet. "One down," I said, staggering back outside. 16 to go. We repeated it at the next gate. And the next. Racing against time, against the rising sun, against the impossible arithmetic of what we were attempting. Each sealing took 15 to 20 minutes. We didn't have enough of either. By the fourth gate, at 1023 hours, we were barely functional. Torres had taken a rock to the arm, blood soaking through his sleeve. Jackson was limping on a badly twisted ankle. Fed's voice was nearly destroyed from constant chanting. But we kept moving. The fifth gate was different. When we arrived at 1118 hours, no figures guarded the entrance. Instead, Standing alone at the mouth of the cave was Private Jonathan Miller. "Miller!" I shouted, breaking into a run. Hayes grabbed my arm. "Hawk, wait." I pulled free. That was my Marine. My responsibility. I got within 10 feet before I saw his eyes. Still glowing. Still wrong. "Sergeant Harris," Miller said, and his voice was his own, not the chorus. "Just him. Please. It hurts so much. Make it stop." My rifle wavered. "Miller, we trying. We sealing the gates. We going to get you out." He shook his head slowly, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on his face. "You can't. We too deep. Too far gone. But you can end it." He stepped aside, gesturing to the cave. "Someone has to go all the way through. Past the gates. To the source. Close it from the inside." "That's suicide," Hayes said from behind me. "Yes," Miller agreed. "But it's the only permanent solution. Rahman's method only holds temporarily. The gates will open again. They always do, unless someone goes to the center and seals it from within. Goes to where it all began." "How do you know this?" I demanded. His smile was heartbreaking. "Because we're connected now. All of us, Reed, Price, Anderson, me. We can feel it. The thing that's waking up." His voice dropped. "And Sergeant, it's so hungry." Then he walked into the cave and disappeared. We sealed the 5th gate in silence. And the 6th. And the 7th. Each one heavier than the last, like pushing against a current that kept strengthening. By 14:45 hours, we'd sealed 11 gates. 6 remained, and the sun was sliding toward the western peaks. "We're not going to make it," Jackson said what we were all thinking. "Dark moon ends at 18:47 hours. 4 hours, 6 gates. Then we move faster." But I could hear the hollowness in my own voice. The 12th gate was the hardest yet. The figures protecting it fought back, actually fought, using rocks and debris as weapons. Torres went down hard, a stone catching him at the temple. He wasn't moving. "Leave me," he gasped when I tried to drag him. "Seal the gate. That's the mission." "I'm not leaving anyone else," I snarled, and hauled him over my shoulder. Hayes and Jackson held the entrance while Fed and I completed the ritual. When we emerged, Torres was conscious again, blood matting his hair, but eyes focused. 13, he muttered. "Unlucky number. Let's make it 14. We did, but it cost us the MZR. The transmission finally gave out with a grinding scream and died. We continued on foot, running when we could, walking when we couldn't. Time was bleeding away. At 1,712 hours, with the sun painting the mountains in gold, we reached the 15th gate. 2 remained, but we were wreckage. Torres could barely stand. Jackson's ankle had swollen to twice its size. Fed had stopped speaking entirely, voice gone. Hayes was running on pure will, and I was starting to see things, shadows moving wrong, whispers in languages I shouldn't understand. The longer we spent near these gates, the more they infected us. We were running out of time in more ways than one. The 15th gate sealed at 1,739 hours. 1 hour and 8 minutes until dark moon ended. 2 gates left. "We can't reach both," Hayes said. "Checking the GPS, gate 16 is 3 clicks north. Gate 17 is 5 clicks east. Even if we split up." We don't split up. But my mind was already working. Miller's words. Someone has to go all the way through. "Fed," I said. His ruined voice was barely audible. "Rahman told me something else. If you cannot seal all gates in time, there is another way. Seal the source, the first prison, where it all began. If you seal the temple, all gates seal with it." "Where?" He pointed to a distant peak, half swallowed by cloud. Mount Sikaram, the highest point in Cuna. Before Islam, before Buddhism, before Alexander, there was a temple. They built the gates to contain what lived inside it. How do we get there? We don't, I said quietly. I do. Alone. Absolutely not. Hayes began. You three seal gate 16. I take 17 and then the temple. It's the only way we cover everything before dark moon ends. You can't seal a gate alone. The ritual requires. I held up Raman's stone. It was glowing faintly in my palm, warm to the touch. This stone has been used at 11 gates. It's absorbed enough. I think it can do the work of multiple voices if it has to. A guess. A desperate hope. But we were out of options. Hayes grabbed my shoulder. If you're not back by 1900, then you get everyone you can and you run. Get out of this province. Get out of Afghanistan if you have to. We split at 1,751 hours. I watched my team disappear north, 3 limping figures moving as fast as their broken bodies would carry them. Then I turned east and ran. The 17th gate sat in a gorge so narrow I had to turn sideways to enter. No guards, no sound. Just silence and that pervasive wrongness, reality thin as paper. I sealed it at 1823 hours. 24 minutes until dark moon ended. And I still had to reach the temple. Mount Sikaram loomed above me, peak lost in cloud. The climb was nearly vertical in places, forcing hands and knees on rock that crumbled underfoot. Rifle slung across my back. Lungs burning. Muscles long past protest. But I kept moving. At 1842 hours, 5 minutes to spare, I reached the summit. The temple wasn't ruins. It was intact, carved directly from the mountain. Massive stone columns supporting a roof dense with those carved symbols. And in the center, a pit. Deep black. Bottomless. The source of everything. Standing at its edge was Marcus Reed. "Hawk," he said, and his voice was entirely his own. "You made it." I approached slowly. "Reed, are you you?" He smiled, and it almost looked natural. Enough to make a choice. Enough to say goodbye. "We sealing this. All of it. You'll be free." He shook his head. "That's not how it works. Someone has to stay. A keeper for the source. Like Raman at the first gate. Someone to hold the door closed from inside. Then I'll stay." "No." His voice was firm. "It has to be one of us. One of the ones who already went through. We already part of it. Already changed. If you stayed, it would just consume you. But me, I can hold it. I can keep it sleeping." I couldn't speak. "You're not asking," I finally said. "I'm volunteering." He reached into his pocket and produced 4 sets of dog tags. His and the others. "Give these to command. Tell them we died in combat. Heroes, not whatever this is." I took them. Metal cold in my palm. "Miller, Price, Anderson. Are they?" "They are with me. All of us together. We'll take turns. Keep watch. Make sure it never wakes up." He gestured to the pit. "You need to do the ritual now. Seal it while the dark moon holds." I knelt at the edge of the pit, placed Raman's stone on the ground, and began to chant. My voice was rough and broken, but the words came. The stone blazed brighter and brighter until it hurt to look at. The pit began to close, stone flowing like water, sealing itself shut. Reed stood at the edge, watching me with eyes that were fully human again. "Tell my mom I loved her," he said. "Tell her I died doing something that mattered." "Reed. Go, Hawk, before it's too late." The stone sealed completely as the sun dropped below the horizon. Dark moon ended, and Marcus Reed was gone. sealed inside a mountain with 3 other Marines and whatever ancient thing they were holding in the dark. I descended in darkness, following the path by touch and memory. Somewhere in the night, I heard gunfire. Then silence. Then nothing. I found Hayes, Torres, and Jackson at dawn, sitting outside the sealed 16th gate. They looked like ghosts, pale, hollow-eyed, but alive. The gates. Sealed. Hayes confirmed. All of them. Whatever you did at the temple, it worked. The figures just stopped. Dropped like their strings were cut. FOB Viper. He shook his head. Rescue teams arrived an hour ago. There are survivors. But it's bad, Hawk. Real bad. We walked back together. 4 Marines who had witnessed something they could never explain and would never be believed about. The sun rose over the mountains, beautiful and terrible both. And somewhere deep in Mount Sikaram, Marcus Reed stood watch over his sleeping nightmare. They gave us medals, told us we'd repelled a coordinated Taliban assault, saved the base, recovered critical intelligence. The official record bore no resemblance to what actually happened. Director Clean personally handed me Reed's silver star. I wanted to throw it in her face. Instead, I saluted and said nothing. We were rotated stateside within a week. Honorable discharges, full benefits, and NDAs thick enough to stop bullets. I signed. Because what choice did I have? Who would have believed the truth anyway? Hayes works construction in Colorado now. Jackson teaches high school in Texas. Torres went to medical school. Says he wants to help people after watching so many get hurt. Fed vanished. I've searched for him, but it's as if he never existed. Me. I became a park ranger in Montana. Mountains and caves everywhere. I check them all, looking for symbols I hope I never find. Some nights, when the moon is dark, I swear I can hear Reed's voice on the wind. Not the chorus, his real voice. Saying he's okay. Saying they are holding. Saying the world is safe for one more day. I hope he's right. I hope they can hold forever, because I've seen what happens when ancient things wake up. And if that temple ever opens again, there won't be anyone left to stop it. My name is Sergeant Daniel Harris. Call sign, Hawk. And this is the truth about what happened in Kuna Province in 2008. Command will deny it. The records will say something else. But I was there. I saw it. And I'll carry those 4 dog tags until the day I die. If you're watching this and you serve, do me one favor. If you ever receive orders to investigate a cave system in eastern Afghanistan, especially anywhere near Mount Sikaram, find a reason to say no. File a report. Go AWOL. Just don't go into those mountains. Some doors should stay closed. Some Marines should never be forgotten. And some sacrifices are too great to ever repay. Reed, Miller, Price, Anderson, if you can hear this, wherever you are not forgotten. You are heroes. And I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home. Still watching without subscribing? Hit that button now, and drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time you're watching this. Let's remember these warriors together.